From the academy to the command post, the Weekend Wrap-Up podcast covers the leadership lessons, mentorship, and tough conversations needed to build a resilient firehouse. Rated as one of the best fire and emergency services podcasts, get ready to be empowered by host Kevin Ferrara as he presents another informative episode you won't want to miss. Get ready, folks. Here we go.
Welcome, everybody. You're listening to AFFF 21's Weekend Wrap-Up podcast. Here is your host, Kevin Ferrara.
If you're involved with fire and emergency medical services in any manner, get your pen out. Today, we're laying down a complete operational playbook on what might be the single most critical health threat facing emergency responders. In the first half of this episode, we're going to strip away the complex academic jargon and explain exactly what PFAS chemicals are, why they've been engineered into our gear and stations for decades, and how they enter our bodies, and the serious medical conditions they cause if left unmonitored. In the second half, we'll turn knowledge into direct operational action. I'm going to walk you through simple, clear, actionable policy frameworks, clean cab procedures, EMS-specific exposure reduction protocols, and biological surveillance guidelines, including PFAS blood testing, that you can take straight to your safety committee, chief officer, or municipal leaders to implement immediately within your department. Welcome to another episode of AFFF 21's Weekend Wrap-Up podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ferrara. Those who've been following me for the past decade, they know how passionate I am when it comes to PFAS. They know me as someone who's been exposed to PFAS repeatedly and because of such is dealing with various medical conditions. They know me as one of the nation's most outspoken advocates about occupational exposure to PFAS among emergency responders. They also know me as someone who's not afraid to stand up and demand answers and accountability from those who secretly poisoned emergency responders and many others with products laced with PFAS. So without further ado, let's jump right into the science. What is PFAS? PFAS. Well, PFAS stands for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. The acronym PFAS represents a massive family of thousands of synthetic chemicals developed in the early to mid-20th century. Research showing PFAS dates back to the 1940s. Some say there are more than 12,000 PFAS chemicals. Others believe there's more. To understand why PFAS chemicals are so persistent, picture a chain of carbon atoms completely surrounded and wrapped by fluorine atoms. Folks, this isn't going to be a science class, so bear with me for a second. In organic chemistry, the bond between a carbon atom and a fluorine atom is one of the strongest bonds known to science. It's virtually indestructible. Heat doesn't easily break it down, water slides right off of it, oil can't penetrate it, and bacteria can't digest it. So because of that, I consider PFAS chemicals as the cockroaches of the chemical industry, seemingly impervious to everything. That is for now. Because of those exact properties, chemical manufacturers realized they had a miracle compound for industrial and commercial applications. Product manufacturers who learned about PFAS, well, they secretly put it in their nonstick cookware, water-repellent clothing, stain-resistant carpets, food packaging, and crucially for emergency services, firefighting equipment, turnout gear, and foam. The problem is that the very strength that makes these chemicals so useful in manufacturing makes them a nightmare inside the human body. That's why the public and scientific community refer to them as forever chemicals. When you ingest, inhale, or absorb standard organic compounds, your liver and kidneys break them down and excrete them relatively quickly. However, When PFAS enters your bloodstream, it stays there. The half-life, meaning the time it takes your body to naturally clear just half of the chemical from your system, can range anywhere from 3 to 8 years, depending on the specific compound, like PFOA, PFAS, or PFH excess. You don't know it, but you aren't just exposed once. Rather, you're repeatedly exposed over a 20, maybe 30-year career. Therefore, the intake outpaces the elimination. The chemicals, they stack up in your blood, liver, and tissue over time. That process is known as bioaccumulation. For me personally, I've been exposed many times to a lot of different PFAS chemicals, so much that when I die, and let's be honest, hopefully not for a long time, there will be significant levels remaining in my blood serum. So, where is this exposure coming from during your shift? Well, it boils down to 4 primary occupational vectors: foam, turnout gear, fires, and station environments. So first, let's talk about aqueous film-forming foam, or AFFF. For decades, fluorinated foam was the industry standard for smothering flammable liquid fires. The active ingredient creating that vapor-suppressing aqueous film was PFAS. Every time fire crews trained with AFFF, knocked down a fuel spill, or flushed foam lines, they didn't know it, but they were breathing in chemical mist, absorbing it through their skin, and contaminating local soil and water. Next up, we have turnout gear. Folks, here's the uncomfortable reality the fire service profession has had to confront. The protective ensembles designed to shield firefighters from thermal hazards, well, they've been silently exposing them to toxic chemistry. Structural turnout gear traditionally relied on PFAS in 3 distinct layers: the outer shell for water and oil repellency, the moisture barrier, that middle liner, which often uses expanded fluoropolymer membranes, and then the thermal liner. As turnout gear ages, flexes, suffers UV exposure, or gets heated during structural firefighting, these fluoropolymers, well, they break down. They shed microplastics and chemical-laden dust. So when your body heat rises during suppression or overhaul, your pores open up, accelerating dermal absorption. Next, we have fires. Because manufacturing has evolved over the last decades, the materials found in homes and consumer products today, when heated or consumed by fire, they emit products of combustion that contain high levels of PFAS. These products of combustion, that's smoke, soot, gases, and fumes, they're absorbed into the turnout gear, your station wear, your bare skin, and eventually in your blood serum and tissues. Folks, I can't tell you how many times I received photos and videos of firefighters not wearing their turnout gear or SCBAs during firefighting operations, especially during salvage and overhaul. Despite scientific evidence, many firefighters still believe that if there's no visible smoke, the atmosphere, well, it must be okay to enter. It's that mentality that leads to firefighters developing cancer. I speak about this in an episode called The Invisible Killer: Why Clean Air is a Lie on the Fire Ground, and I encourage you to listen to that. Fourth, we have station wear, station dust, and EMS environments. PFAS, folks, doesn't stay on the fire ground. When dirty turnouts are worn into living quarters or stored on the apparatus bay floor, they shed dust. That dust, often disturbed by air circulated through HVAC systems, settles on your couches, your kitchen tables, and countertops, leading to hand-to-mouth ingestion during meals or inhaled while your crews are sleeping. Furthermore, EMS personnel responding to motor vehicle accidents in turnout pants or riding an apparatus with off-gassing gear, they're constantly breathing in these particulates and carrying them directly into the back of the ambulances. So just because you don't see a visible plume doesn't mean the air is clean. Here's an analogy to consider. And how many times has one of your crew members snuck out a nasty fart in the cab and the odor made you almost throw up? I bet you could taste it too, huh? Yeah, it's nasty. That fart, that was a result of digestion, a combination of harmless air, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide. But unlike a fart, and I can't believe I'm talking about this, but it's true, PFAS chemicals are entirely odorless, colorless, and tasteless. Inhaling PFAS fumes might not make you gag or throw up, but it could lead to serious chronic health effects, even a single occurrence. Unfortunately, there's currently no small, cheap, handheld smoke detector style active electronic box that instantly displays a digital readout for a specific PFAS gas, vapor, fume, or dust. Because PFAS encompasses thousands of distinct chemicals within varying volatility, real-time continuous active air monitoring, it requires advanced mass spectrometry or specialized active multi-stage sorbent samplers analyzed in a lab. Therefore, my recommendation, 1, don't sniff farts, and 2, always mask up, even when the air looks clean during salvage and overhaul. So now let's talk about what happens when PFAS chemicals build up inside your body. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, an arm of the World Health Organization, they've officially classified PFOA as a Category 1 human carcinogen and PFOS as a Category 2B possible carcinogen. When PFAS bioaccumulates, it targets multiple biological systems. From an oncology perspective, peer-reviewed studies show a direct statistically significant link between elevated PFAS exposure and increased risks of kidney cancer, testicular cancer, prostate cancer, and thyroid cancer. Kidney and testicular cancers are particularly dangerous because in their early stages, they're almost entirely asymptomatic. From an endocrine and metabolic perspective, PFAS disrupts normal hormone production, leading to thyroid disease, both hypo and hyperthyroidism. This often manifests as chronic fatigue, sudden weight changes, and metabolic dysfunction, which firefighters frequently mistake for simple shift work exhaustion or burnout. Furthermore, PFAS alters lipid metabolism, driving up serum cholesterol and triglycerides. When you combine chemical-induced hypercholesterolemia with the extreme physical exertion and heat stress of firefighting, you drastically increase the risk of early onset coronary artery disease and sudden cardiac events on duty. And finally, PFAS acts as an immunosuppressant. It impairs immune cell function, leading to decreased antibody responses to vaccines and rendering first responders more susceptible to infectious diseases encountered on routine EMS transport calls. So this brings us to a critical operational solution every department must consider: routine PFAS serum blood testing as part of an annual occupational medical exam, such as those found in NFPA 1580 physicals. We know the importance of screening our blood for cancer, so why should blood testing for PFAS just be as important? Well, first, you can't manage what you don't measure. A baseline blood test tells a member and their department where their serum levels stand today. Second, tracking serum levels across a department over 3 to 5 years provides hard data on whether your exposure reduction policies and clean cab procedures are actually working. And third, and most importantly, it enables targeted medical surveillance. When you request a PFAS blood panel through your occupational health provider, ensure the lab utilizes liquid chromatography tandem mass spectrometry. That's a mouthful, I know. To measure key targeted compounds. PFOA, PFAS, PFHXS, and PFNA, to name a few. If a member's blood panel reveals high serum levels, such as exceeding the National Academies of Sciences threshold of 2 nanograms per milliliter, their occupational physician can immediately initiate earlier targeted screening protocols. That means ordering lipid panels, maybe kidney ultrasounds, detailed thyroid panels, pregnancy-induced hypertension monitoring, and testicular examinations years before clinical symptoms manifest. Early detection is what turns a potential fatal diagnosis into a treatable condition. So, folks, I think this is a good time to take a short break, hear from one of our sponsors. So stay tuned, because when we come back, we're going to talk about PFAS policy implementation.
All right, listeners, we've got some huge news to share. AFSO 21's Weekend Wrap-Up podcast is officially an affiliate with the Energy Drink. The Energy Drink brand was built by firefighters and supports emergency responders and military personnel. You, as fire and emergency responders, know that staying locked into your tasks and goals takes serious focus. And let's be honest, a lot of stamina. Whether you're powering through a multi-alarm fire, studying for a promotion exam, or just gearing up for some much-needed time off on the weekend, the Energy Drink has you covered with clean, sustained energy and killer flavors. No crash, just results. And because you're part of the AFSO 21 family, we're hooking you up. Head over to the Energy Drink website today at theenergydrink.com and use the promo code AFSO21 at checkout to get 10% off your entire order. That's right, use code AFSO21 to save 10% on your next restock. So what are you waiting for? Fuel your focus, elevate your game, and let's keep pushing forward together.
Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for staying with me on this important topic. As we dive into the second half of this episode, I'd like you to consider the following. How do you take the science and turn it into operational standard operating procedures for your organization? Well, to build an effective department safety policy, we look to industrial hygiene's hierarchy of controls, moving from the most effective control measures down to personal protective equipment. At the top of the hierarchy is elimination and substitution. Your department's primary policy goal should be the total phase-out of legacy fluorinated foams. If not already in effect, draft an immediate SOP prohibiting any training exercise using legacy foam. Replace those inventories with modern fluorine-free foams, or F3, that meet UL 162 performance standards. When retrofitting apparatus foam tanks, establish a strict decontamination protocol to flush those legacy residuals before refilling with fluorine-free alternatives, and dispose of old foam through certified hazardous waste channels. And for those out there listening that are thinking of it, or are dumping foam or turnout gear cleaning wastewater down a sewer drain, doing so routes the contamination to a wastewater treatment facility that's most likely not equipped to remove those contaminants. In fact, the contamination you think you're getting rid of, it's actually spreading over a wider area where it's going to potentially cause more harm, such as polluting drinking water sources. Furthermore, as non-PFAS turnout gear, including PFAS-free outer shells, moisture barriers, and water-repellent finishes, become more widely available under updated standards, mandate that all future capital gear replacement cycles specify non-fluorinated materials. The next tier is engineering controls and administrative policies. This is where we address station hygiene and apparatus design through a formalized clean cab and clean station SOP. First, institute a strict quarantine of turnout gear. That means no structural gear, helmets, boots, or contaminated EMS equipment should ever cross the threshold into station living quarters, sleeping dorms, kitchens, or gym spaces. The gear must remain isolated in designated, negatively pressured gear rooms. If you see someone wearing turnout gear in these areas, let them know immediately they need to remove themselves. Second, enforce clear apparatus cab protocols. Turnout coats and pants shouldn't be worn inside the cab during return trips from working fires. Post-incident, gear should be gross deconned on scene, placed in sealed exterior compartments or airtight gear bags, and then transported back to quarters. Driver operators and interior crews, well, they should transition to clean station wear before driving or riding back. Additionally, mandate that apparatus cabs undergo routine wet wiping and HEPA vacuuming to eliminate toxic dust accumulation on seats, dashes, and floor mats. Now, some departments mandate that after every call, the cab is thoroughly cleansed top to bottom. But consider this: if the cab is cleaned after a response, when the tones drop on the next call, how likely is it that when the crew enters the cab, they're already wearing dirty gear? Something to seriously consider, right? Even when a crew performs gross decon on scene and doffs their gear down to their station wear, if they don't clean the seats with the decon wipes before sitting down, they're likely going to be sitting on contaminated seats. Folks, I already know what some of you are going to say. Well, Kev, if that's the case, then why even bother practicing the Clean Cab Initiative? Look, I get it. I really do. But that's where you and your leadership have to sit down and come up with ways to minimize cross-contamination. These episodes that I provide, they only give you ideas. They're designed to stir conversations, not provide definitive solutions. It's up to each of you to do that for yourselves based on your own environments. What works for you might not necessarily work for another department. So when you sit down as a team and brainstorm solutions, just remember, at the end of the day, doing nothing will never improve a situation. So whatever you practice, just make sure it's not making the situation worse. Kind of like mitigating a hazardous materials incident. In my opinion, a contaminated cab should be considered a hazardous material scene because do you really know what contaminants are in the cab that you might be exposed to? I seriously doubt you do. What's on your turnout gear from the last incident and is now all over the inside of the cab as you're responding to an emergency? Do you know? As you're slipping on your SCBA, those contaminants are being disturbed and floating around in the air within the cab. If you're a volunteer firefighter, because you tossed your gear in the back seat or trunk, the contaminants are now covering the interior next to where you might put groceries or your child. Scary stuff to consider for sure. Next, we have to look specifically at EMS operations. Paramedics and EMTs, they're frequently exposed to PFAS when wearing turnout gear to highway incidents for visibility or abrasion protection, or maybe transporting firefighters from a scene. To eliminate this cross-contamination, departments should issue dedicated, non-fluorinated rescue or extrication jackets and pants designed specifically for EMS operations, therefore offering high visibility and cut resistance without relying on thermal PFAS moisture barriers. Furthermore, establish an SOP prohibiting firefighters from riding in the rear patient compartments of an ambulance while wearing turnout gear, unless they're actively performing heavy rescue in a hazardous area. Require members to strip down to clean station wear before initiating patient care in the back of a unit. Remember, we're not just concerned only about ourselves, but also patients. We're trying to minimize this cross-contamination as much as possible. And then the final layer is personal protective equipment and individual hygiene controls. Whatever policy you establish, it must enforce immediate post-incident decontamination protocols. Every working fire or heavy exposure incident must conclude with an on-scene gross decon process using water lines and detergent wipes to remove surface particulates from gear and exposed skin, specifically the neck, face, and hands. Because station wear is likely to be contaminated or become wet from gross decon, consider equipping your apparatus with loose-fitting clothing that crew members they might switch into if needed, such as sweatpants, sweatshirts, shorts, and t-shirts. I can already hear it. Kev, if it's wintertime, we're not going to decon and strip down due to the cold. I get that too. But if you don't, you're going to put yourself and others at risk of inhaling particulates or fumes from the gear that's shedding or off-gassing. And this is why departments need to consider potential rehab assets. So crews, they don't have to stand out in the cold. They can use those assets, maybe like a school bus, to hop in, get warm. But they can also use those same assets to change into clean clothing before returning back to quarters. Sure, if you use a school bus, you're going to have to decon the bus. But if you have something that's dedicated strictly to the fire department, you don't have to, you still have to decon it, but you don't have to worry about is that school bus now clean enough to put kids into. So upon returning to the station, you need to enforce a mandatory shower within the hour policy. Folks, your body heat from firefighting opens up skin pores, allowing lipophilic compounds to absorb rapidly. So getting into warm shower within 60 minutes significantly reduces your dermal absorption. And finally, strictly prohibit members from taking contaminated station wear home to launder in their personal washing machines with family clothing. Can't tell you how many times I've seen and heard of this happening. All of your station wear and turnouts must be processed on site in quarters using dedicated commercial gear extractors. And I don't recommend washing your station wear with your turnout gear. Believe it or not, some departments do. Studies have found that even when using approved extractors to clean turnout gear, while the gear may look clean, lab results showed trace amounts of contaminants, specifically PFAS and other volatile compounds, still remained on the gear. This goes back to what I said earlier involving the Clean Cab initiative. Some departments don't have proper turnout gear cleaning equipment or a second set of gear. Therefore, when crews respond to a call, it's very likely they're wearing gear that's covered in some type of contaminant from a previous call. Do you know what those are? I sure don't. Implementing these policies, it'll inevitably run into cultural resistance. In the fire service, dirty helmets and soot-stained turnouts, they were historically viewed as a badge of honor. As leaders, safety officers, peer advocates, your job is to rewrite that narrative. A dirty uniform isn't a sign of aggressive firefighting. It's a vector for toxicity that threatens not just your life, but the health of your coworkers and your family when you bring those compounds home. Professionalism in the modern fire and EMS service means operational excellence paired with rigorous health and safety discipline. To drive this change effectively, involve your labor unions, safety committees, rank and file members, your municipal leaders in drafting SOPs. When everyone understands the scientific why behind the Clean Cab rules, equipment procurement, blood testing, compliance shifts from an enforced mandate to a shared cultural standard. So as we wrap up this episode, remember these 4 key takeaways. 1. PFAS is an indestructible bioaccumulative chemical present in legacy foam, traditional turnout gear, station dust, and a multitude of consumer products. 2. Regular PFAS blood testing through occupational health providers provides vital baselines and enables early detection of kidney, thyroid, and cardiovascular conditions. 3. Administrative SOPs, including clean cabs, living quarter quarantines, and dedicated EMS gear, are critical to breaking the chain of exposure. And 4. Cultural shift starts at the top and on the tailboard. That means everybody has to be involved. Clean gear and proactive hygiene are the ultimate marks of professional readiness. So with that, please take care of yourselves, look out for yourself and your crews, and take these policies or recommendations back to your department this week and talk about them. Modify them to best fit your organization. Again, what works in your department may not necessarily work in somebody else's. Don't ignore this issue because the more it's ignored, the more severe it becomes. So thanks for listening to AFSO 21's Weekend Wrap-Up Podcast. I'm Kevin Ferrara, and as always, stay safe, stay clean, and I'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening. To follow Kevin and the Weekend Wrap-Up Podcast from your favorite streaming platform, open the podcast description and then click the Support the Show link, or go to AFFF21.com. From there, click the Weekend Wrap-Up Podcast link, which will allow you to follow the show, download episodes, learn more about our contributors and the podcast. Subscribe, which gives you exclusive access to premium and/or bonus episodes. Or support the show, where you can make a much-appreciated contribution of your choice. You can even click on the podcasts we love to build your personal podcast library. We here at the Weekend Wrap-Up Podcast appreciate you and look forward to bringing you more episodes that support the work you're doing in fire and emergency services. Remember, click the Support the Show link or head over to our website at AFFF21.com. Stay safe.